that's your chance to get involved. Yeah, as this is a fundraising event, I thought I would just spend a couple of minutes just talking about money. And the first thing I should say is thank you all very much for buying a ticket. And also thanks to those people who added a little bit to their ticket. There was quite a few of those, so that's most appreciated. It takes about £5,000 at a minimum to run a constituency branch. For that money, you get about 2 or 3 leaflets to go around the whole constituency, 40,000 houses at a time. You get a website if you're prepared to do it all yourself. And you might get a chance to buy a few roller blinds and bits and pieces for a street stall. But that's just about it. This event tonight will raise about half that amount, and we hope to have a second event like it later on in the year. But if we are to get serious about challenging the Lib Dems and the Conservatives in Surrey, I feel we're going to have to raise a lot more money. Although it's a ticklish subject, and I don't much like talking about it, I have to say, the sorts of things we might want to do are we might want to have a professional canvass of the area so we know exactly who our supporters are and where they live. We might want to do targeted social media adverts through a professional body. Or we might simply want to run our big advertising truck around for the whole length of the campaign instead of just the 2 days that we were able to do it at the last general election, because that was all we could afford. So if possible, and you can help with a financial contribution, that would be most appreciated. And just please come and see me in the bar afterwards. And just want to emphasise, it doesn't matter whether or not you're a Dorking and Hawley member. Other chairmen are here. I can put you in touch with them, and you can take it from there. So thank you very much for that. Okay, so now I want to introduce you to our surprise guest. And I'm sure 1 or 2 of you have already worked out that it is, of course, Mayuran Senthilnathan. Now, Mayuran was the candidate in Epsom and Ewell, and I noticed that everyone who came in contact with him thought he was a really good guy. So then, later on, I saw him speak. He gave a fantastic speech at the South East Regional Conference, and I was so impressed by that, actually, that I played it again to our branch members about 3 weeks later. And ever since then, I've had people saying to me, you know, you want to book Mayuran, come on, book Mayuran. So I'm very pleased to say I have booked Mayuran tonight. So please give a very warm welcome to Reform UK Rising Star, Surrey man, here by popular demand, Mayuran Senthilnathan.
Thank you very much, Jeff. And I just want to say, it's a real honour to have shared a stage with Richard, because without Richard, I wouldn't have a voice in British politics at all. We wouldn't have a vehicle to fight for this country at all if it wasn't for the personal sacrifice of Richard and his financial sacrifice even to keep going and keep the party going all this time. He had so many options, Richard Tice. Rumour has it, and I was saying to him earlier, look how dashing Richard looks. Rumour has it he was next in line after Daniel Craig to be the next James Bond. They even had a whole film scripted ready. Richard Tice's 007 License to Drill. Right? That was Richard Tice. He had all of these options, but he chose to fight for this country through reform. It's been an interesting week. Keir Starmer, we've had the Conservative Party, who are basically on life support at the moment. Keir Starmer, the globalist, the Davos-loving individual, the one who sees international law as divine revelation, is now channeling the spirit of Enoch Powell, believe it or not. It's now two-tier Keir has gone on to become far-right Keir, in an effort to woo us in this room. But we all know, everybody knows this, the public know this, the Labour, they don't have the hardware to do anything that this country needs. So what he's doing is he's flirting with all of you. He's showing a bit of ankle. He's trying to tease all of you. While Nigel and Richard have been campaigning for strong borders for decades, Starmer assumes a personality just for expediency. It's the politics of power versus the politics of conviction which we stand for. That's what reform is all about. But do you know what it is? He has come up with a policy, for example, the care home policy, restrictions on employing people from abroad. When you're running scared and you're terrified and you make policy like that, it always has holes and it always goes wrong. Now everybody's asking, who's going to fill the 130,000 vacancies in a care home? He hasn't thought about unlocking the welfare system, the civilization that are languishing on the welfare system. He hasn't thought about raising tax thresholds so that people keep more money in their pocket and incentivized to work. He hasn't thought about putting training and and expertise in to train people to get into workforce. And as Richard was saying earlier, to deregulate the care sector. If we are going to wean off this country from mass immigration, from a dysfunctional economy that relies on mass immigration like a drug addict, we need a whole system government approach that only reform is offering. And that's the difference. The public will start to see that sharp difference between us. But the real kind of notorious statement that he made was, we are an island of strangers, right? And it sent chills down the back of his backbenchers, right? We're an island of strangers. Even he, in his empty rhetoric, is starting to realize something deeply profound. The economy is critical. Energy prices are critical. But at the epicenter of British politics right now, it is culture and it is identity. People are feeling like we are losing this country, like sand sipping through our fingers. We are losing the very nature of what it is to be British. We have suffered under successive governments no less than a cultural assassination on this country. And that is what is motivating people and causing people to lament. Kemi Badenoch, she said this country has been treated like a dormitory, has been treated like a hotel. But I don't think she's gone far enough. This country has effectively been pimped out on a street corner. That's what's happened. If you look at the reality of what's happened to this country, sectarian politics on the rise, towns and cities unrecognizably British. I have people, friends coming from abroad, and they're like, you telling me this is England? Are you telling me this is Britain? Over 1 million people who can't speak English. You know, we have crime, sexual assault through the roof. This is what is antagonizing people more and more. And the Conservative Party, some of them believe, oh, the solution to getting back voters from reform is to get Boris Johnson back in the fray. That they're responsible for the Boris wave. I call him Boris the betrayer, right? Boris the betrayer who sold out this country. He's one of the ones who pimped out this country. He'd be better suited to working for Serco than he would for the British government. When we won the Runcorn election, Nigel was interviewed, I think by a Sky News journalist who said, when Nigel was talking about the immigrant and migrant hotels, the Sky News journalist said to him, aren't you sowing division? Aren't you sowing division, Nigel? Isn't reform sowing division in this country? I think they asked you that even yesterday in Peston. They asked Richard that, aren't you sowing division? That's a common accusation against Reform UK. They do not understand. We are saving this country from fracturing irreversibly. That is what reform is doing. The anger and resentment that is building is so palpable right now. Professor David Betts, have any of you heard of him? An academic of war studies. He has systematically, academically laid out the future of what Britain is heading towards. He is basically predicting that we are heading for some kind of sectarian civil war, right? And he's mapping out academically, this is not just opinion or rhetoric, academically the symptoms that are going to be set in place for this to happen. That anger, that resentment is boiling because there is a democratic deficit. People are losing faith in democracy. Labour started the experiment of mass immigration. The Conservatives have put it on steroids. And the Lib Dems, they don't even know it's happening. They don't even know it's happening. They're living in their insular world. They have no idea. And they're living their self-righteous world. They have no clue what's going on. Ed Davey doesn't even take himself seriously, let alone the country. But that is the nature of what is going on. Reform is here to restore faith in democracy, to relieve the pressure through action, by listening to people, by implementing the right policies and pressurizing the government to make the change that the British people want. The answer to a failed multicultural experiment is a unifying British identity that brings us all together. I was born here. My parents have come from Sri Lanka. I'm a devout Hindu. But do you know what I love to see? When we announced that we'll have the British flag in our county councils, right? That made me so happy. A simple gesture. A simple gesture. We're not going to have a pride flag, a Palestine flag, or even a Ukrainian flag as much as we support them. We're going to have a British flag because that is the unifying identity, regardless of your ethnicity, your background, whatever it is. I'm a Hindu, a devout Hindu, I have a heritage from Sri Lanka. But all of that needs to align to the values and principles of that flag because we are one nation and one people. That is what reform is bringing to the table. And if we look at the county council elections, right, we are swept across England. We're going to sweep across Wales, God willing. We're going to sweep across Scotland. And what we're going to find is something very, very interesting over the next 2-3 years. The groundwork, the grassroots of this country at local level will be ruled by Reform UK. But the national government will be ruled by Labour. Labour will have the authority of Parliament, but do you know what? We will have the authority of the people. And what we will do is this so-called loveless landslide that the Labour enjoyed will be toppled by cutting the very foundations. We will tackle the very grassroots of the country, and this whole Labour tree will fall apart. We are setting the agenda. Have you noticed Keir Starmer is now dancing to our tune, right? And what's going to happen as time goes on, as reform succeeds? The backbenchers of the Labour Party are going to realise we've got nothing to lose. We're going to lose our seats. And a massive schism is going to form in the Labour Party because of reform's success. And they are going to act as our ambassadors within the Labour Party to put pressure on Keir Starmer to get us in the right direction. What this means is we don't necessarily have to wait to the next general election to see some kind of movement and alignment. And that is because of the success of Reform UK. That is what we need to realise. Now, what I would say is we have to realise Nigel knows how to win the argument. We don't live in a presidential system, right? Where you can just stand there and say your piece and it's me versus him. Nigel knows. This is why he's a once-in-a-generation, perhaps once-in-a-century campaigner and statesman. He knows how to build a party and how to take a party across the country in the first-past-the-post system. And he knows how to win. And what we'll find by 2029 is the legacy of the Labour Party. Their legacy will be this: a series of broken promises. Stop the boat, smash the gangs. Do you think they're going to do that? Net zero. A green revolution. Tony Blair's already smacked the bottom of Ed Miliband and sent him to his room. That's already happened. An AI revolution. You're not going to get an AI revolution if you don't have cheap energy. 1.5 million homes, Angela Rayner says. They're not going to build that. And even if they do, it's going to go to the migrants. Right? And Rachel Reeves, what does she say? Growth. The mantra of growth. If I chant it enough, the heavens will open and the money will flow. No, we are heading for a recession. Broken promises will be the legacy, peppered with a prime minister who only delivers endless word salads that mean nothing, right? That will be the legacy. Our legacy will be to sweep in at that opportune moment to take power. And Nigel said this in one of his interviews. He said we would have the legislation ready, the homework will be done, so the King's speech on day one of that Parliament will be there ready to pull back the country from the brink of destruction, because that's where it will be, no doubt. And what reform has to do is initiate a great British resurrection. That is what we need, a great British resurrection. We are at a civilizational moment. I truly believe that. This is a once-in-a-century situation in British politics. We are at the forefront of this wave, behind Richard and Nigel, and this is what we are fighting for. We are fighting for this country. Thank you very much.
Yes, now you see that's the problem with having Mayuran speak. Someone has to speak after him. And that duty, though he's laughing, of course falls to Richard. And I've been pondering this week how I might introduce Richard to you, because I've not met him until this evening, and he seems like kind of a private guy. So I thought I'd settle on the one thing that I think I know about Richard. And now you'll all recall that, of course, he used to be the leader of Reform UK, and he graciously handed over that title to Nigel, and apparently without either falling out with Nigel or anyone else. And what I think I take from this is that Richard has a true commitment to Reform UK. And I sometimes get asked as a branch chairman what I think of the various leaders of our party. And I've not met any of them, really, so I can't say anything for certain. But what I do sometimes say is, well, you know, I think one thing is that if Reform UK started to go south for some reason and people were trying to blow up the party, as our enemies very much want, then Richard would still be there, emerging from the smoke and ruins, holding it all together. So please give a good welcome to the gracious and steadfast Richard Tice.
Hopefully that'll work. Good evening, thank you very much. Good evening, everybody. You're very kind indeed. Lovely to see everybody. Thank you so much for being here. Sometimes I have a warm-up act, but actually you've just had the main event. I'm the cool-down act. Mayuran is absolutely brilliant. The plan is I'm going to talk for about 15 minutes, 20 minutes, I might, depending on how excitable I get. And then we'll take some questions. I will do the easy ones. This is the way it works. The difficult ones, Mayuran will do. And if he doesn't like them, he'll probably take your teeth out, because he's a dentist. Anyway, look, it's wonderful to be here in Dorking, because it's sort of very personal to me, because my late father lived just down the road at Forest Green. So Dorking is very special to me. And of course, it's the heart of a piece of old England. And it's a fantastic place. And what a great barn this is, an old tithe barn. Look, this has been quite a journey. I can't quite believe it. Exactly 4 years ago, when we had our first council elections as Reform UK, I think we stood 80 candidates. And I think we won 1.5. It might have been 2. Here we are 4 years later. And we won, on May the 1st, we won 677 councillors. 10 councils, 2 mayors, and a landslide victory in the parliamentary by-election. So it was quite a night. And it was the journey of that night, I just thought I'd sort of share with you, because I remember back as the Brexit Party when we had the by-election in June 19, and a couple of people here were with us then. And that that was robbed from us. But I just remember that. And so I was very, very cautious about Runcorn and Helsby, 16th safest Labour seat. But it was in a complete roller coaster. At about sort of 11 o'clock up in Runcorn, I was in Lincolnshire, they were confident. Don't worry, we've got it in the bag. A couple of hours later, it's looking a bit close. About an hour later, it's gone away from us. And then it's close. And it was fine. On the recount, we won by an extra 50%. It was the closest ever parliamentary by-election, I think, since records began. So, in a sense, what those results proved was that something truly was and is happening out there. We first said it back in the general election last sort of summer. In June, we were travelling around like lunatics, and The expression we were using, something's happening out there, it sort of felt like nothing we'd ever experienced before, and nothing Nigel had ever experienced before. And as Mayuran quite rightly said, there's no one more experienced at campaigning than him. But this time around, here we are, 9-10 months later, we were still saying it. Something extraordinary was and is going on. And you think about it, we've now got, we've got 5 MPs, and we are in charge of 10 councils. And before I come on to the councils, I'll just sort of touch about sort of the experience of being in the House of Commons. Firstly, I'm 60. I'm like a kid with a new toy. I've got to be honest. It's such a remarkable privilege. And amongst all the madness, we try and have some fun. So I stood up in the House of Commons today. We were talking about solar panels and solar farms, dreadful things. And so I stood up and I said, as you know, I like to unify everybody with consensus. Even the Labour lot actually laughed. So we're sort of challenging them. And what's great now is that Starmer is absolutely petrified. He really is. So Prime Minister's questions has basically become Starmer against Nigel. And all he's doing is looking at us. And yesterday he looks at Nigel and he just checks he's still one person. It's just extraordinary. Nigel said, he whispers to me, he says, he keeps looking at me. And we have become, and this is the real thing, we have become the real opposition in so many different ways. But of course it is now as a defining moment because we've gone from being a party of opposition to, in these 10 councils, we are now a party of management and governance and organisation. And that's a great thing because now we can, in a sense, we can put some meat on the bone and we can prove that we can run these councils better than the previous bunch. And that's a great opportunity. Will we be perfect? Of course not. No one is. But I think that we will do some really, really great things. And when you look at the quality of some of the CVs and the expertise and experience of some of the candidates, it's truly remarkable. I mean, in Lincolnshire, we've got all sorts. We've got sort of chief operating officers from major logistics firms. We've got top quality finance directors. In Northamptonshire, we've got a fraud investigator. Well, that might be rather useful. I met him a couple of days ago. And so look, I think we will start to uncover some remarkable things. And some of the numbers are quite big. I mean, in Lincolnshire alone, the budget is £1.3 billion. In the balance sheet, there's about £2 billion worth of property, plant and equipment, in theory. Now, it might be more, it might be less, but that's a hell of a lot to go at. And we've got some great property experts who will be able to really extract some value. So I am confident that we will dig up some ridiculous waste. We will extract great value. And that's before you even talk about the pension schemes. So I got an email last night from someone who had sort of just done some rough numbers. Those 10 councils, the value of the pension schemes is tens of billions. And of course, they're all managed by the local government pension scheme, all with their woke trustees. I mean, the thing about pensions is they're really important, but it's not, I mean, it's not, you don't wake up in the morning and jump out of bed and think, pensions. So I got a document through the MP's pension scheme the other week, and it had 2 choices. It either went straight in the bin, or I'd actually read it. Had a quiet evening, so I read it. And sure enough, there it was the woke investments. Sort of the net zero renewable investments. And I dug a bit deeper, and guess what? Were they performing better than the benchmarks? Were they hell? Anyway, so sort of dug into this a bit more, and sure enough, found that actually, this sort of stuff, it's costing the taxpayer money, because if they underperform, then guess who's the person who picks up the tab? It's all of us, it's the taxpayer. And I'm pretty sure we're going to find the same thing in the pension schemes of the 10 councils. So these are all the things that we're going to dig into. And look, in fairness, some of them will be doing a decent job. And funnily enough, I suspect that Lincolnshire might be one of the better run councils. But nevertheless, the voters voted with incredible enthusiasm for us. And I mean, many of us will have been former Conservatives. I went to 3 different count centres on the night, and the looks on some of the former Conservative councillors who'd been councillors for 20 plus years. I mean, Lincolnshire was like, it's never not been Tory. It was a sight to see. But that's the joy of competition. And if you don't perform, someone else is going to come and eat your lunch, and that's basically what we're trying to do. And now the job is for us to perform, of course, and it won't be easy. And of course, you then think, crikey, just imagine if they'd had elections everywhere, if another 5.5 million people had been allowed to have elections. Who knows what would have happened? But we are where we are. It's a great opportunity. And as Mayuran said, where do we go from here? Well, we've got to perform in these councils. And if we do that, then that gives us a good track record for next May when there's many more local elections. But also, of course, there is the Welsh elections where we are polling, give or take, first or first equal. And then we've also got the Scottish elections. And this is hysterical. I'm in Scotland on Saturday. So amongst all the various slogans, I came up with a new one the other week when I was last up there. Drill, Scotland, drill. Well, maybe that's why we're now polling quite well in Scotland. Because they realised that actually one of the great wealth generators in Scotland was, and still just is, the oil and gas industry. And finally, someone's prepared to just call it out. But the establishment they went absolutely nuts. So terrified, you had the SNP and Labour, who hate each other, coming together as a coalition of the terrified. Scratching their heads, what the hell do we do with reform? So, we really are making great progress. And so we're now polling second in Scotland ahead of Labour. Truly remarkable, truly remarkable. So on June the 5th, I think it is, there's an MSP by-election for a Holyrood seat in Hamilton, and we will do the best we can. It would be a stretch to say we're going to win it, but it will be very, very interesting. It'll be sort of our first big test up there. So remarkable things are happening. Now, the pace of expectation, of course, never stops. So we've taken the view, we're not going to in any way take the foot off the accelerator, which is why we are all over whatever media interviews we can do this week, next week, for the next month or so, because we are going to keep pushing and we are succeeding. If you look at the polls at the moment, there's a new minor party that has emerged. It's called the Conservatives. They are now regularly trading in the high teens, and our intention is to keep them there. And if we keep the foot on the gas and we keep the foot on them, then they will start to have serious difficulties with organisation, which is really hard, and money. And Jeff was talking about money, and it is a critical part of everything we do. And it's, running political parties is actually really difficult. It's hard enough to control oneself, but to control thousands of people. So look, we're just going to keep pushing as hard as we can on the key big issues. And Mayuran touched on, obviously, this week, Keir Starmer. I mean, it's quite interesting how on a number of different issues, he's actually been listening and learning to reform. So on defence, in our election contract, we said we wanted 2.5% of GDP spent on defence in 3 years and then 3% in 6 years. And we should slash foreign aid. And a couple of months ago, Starmer said, yeah, that's a good idea. Tick. And so all of a sudden, he adopted that part. And then this week, someone obviously read our manifesto to him and sort of gave him a shake over the weekend. And he gave his own version of Enoch Powell's speech from a few years ago on Monday. He actually had no idea. He had no idea what he'd sort of done and said. But the left in the Labour Party have gone absolutely tonto. I mean, they really have lost their rag. Do we think that he means any of it? Seriously? I mean, this is the man that wanted a second referendum. This is the man that said migration will make us all richer. This is the man that said freedom of movement. Do you remember him sort of strutting around and saying, we must fight for freedom of movement? I think he'd paid for his own suit then. So you can't trust a word this man said. But, I mean, immigration was the main thing that on the doors everybody was talking about. They weren't talking about potholes and bins. What has happened to this country in terms of the damage and the betrayal from the Tories on immigration is quite extraordinary. Both on legal immigration, which we think peaked at 906,000 in the year to June 2023. Hard to trust the data though when the first number that came out for that 12-month period was about 720,000. I'm so sorry, am I boring you? Was about 720,000. And then they recalculated and sort of revised their method of calculation, the ONS, bless their cotton socks, and came up with 906. So, you know, you take the data with a pinch of salt. But we know it's bad. It's well over 1.5 million over 2 years. And we can all, you know, we know it. And that's the legal numbers. And I've always said we want smart immigration. Highly skilled, highly qualified people that can add value. And the key to smart immigration is where people come into a nation, and it's got to work for both sides of the equation. So it's got to work for the host nation as well as the individual lucky enough to come and live in the UK. And that basically involves three critical things. Firstly, you've got to be prepared to integrate, you've got to be prepared to work, and it pretty much helps if you learn to speak the lingo. So last night, a Labour MP sitting on the sofa next to me she couldn't understand when I said that in my constituency town of Boston, wonderful old market town that used to be the second biggest port in the UK 300 years ago after the Port of London. Extraordinary. And the second biggest payer of taxes. She couldn't understand when I said 50% of people walking through the centre of Boston, English is not their first language, and 30% speak not a word of English. In the heart of Lincolnshire, you know, one of the finest sort of old English counties. So she didn't understand that at all. And then obviously you've got the folk coming across the channel, and it's completely chaotic. It's absolutely out of control. It's 30% more than it was sort of this time last year. I think the numbers are give or take 12,000 since January the 1st, approaching 35,000 since the election. This year's probably going to be somewhere between 40 and 50,000. What happens if that continues from now until the next election, about 4 years from now? It's actually hard to comprehend. It's hard to comprehend. I'm not sure, I don't know, it's just hard to comprehend where we'll all be at. But there is I keep saying to the Home Secretary, I said, when are you going to give up on this policy of smashing the gangs, which is not smashing the gangs, it's actually encouraging the gangs? And when are you going to adopt the Reform UK policy? And I must have a sad life. I mean, if I'm not reading a pension document, I'm reading the 1982 Treaty on the UN Convention of the Law at Sea. It's not a Jilly Cooper, I've got to be honest. But I have read this stuff, and I've got a bit of a corporate mind, a bit of a legal mind. So I know exactly the clauses on the basis that the French have a legal obligation to pick up the boats and take them back to their own shores, which is what the Belgian authorities did. And guess what? There are no boats leaving the Belgian authorities. So I also know the exact clauses on which we're entitled to pick people up safely out of the boats and take them back to France. And I've talked about this now for well over a year. And of course, we have got to leave the ECHR. But what's interesting is the other side say, you can't do that, you're not allowed. But they can't point to the clause or the clauses in that convention that tell me I'm not allowed. And what does that tell you?
You are allowed.
There you are, you see. It tells you they're worried. It tells you they're dead worried. Now, we all know a good lawyer can argue two sides of the same coin. Sort of what, I mean, it's why they're so annoying, actually. But that's what a good lawyer can do. And so I know we are legally entitled to do this. And of course, it's the kind and compassionate thing to do. I think last year that we know about 70 people sadly lost their lives in the Channel. This year, it's into double figures already. So the kind and compassionate thing to do is to adopt the Reform UK policy. And the other side hate it when I say that, because of course normally we're not kind and compassionate, apparently. We're terrible people. But there we are. And so we're making huge progress on that, in that the Labour Party realise they've got a massive problem. And it's us. It's not the Tories. It's quite clear that voters will not forgive, and they won't forget what the Tories did to the country, both in terms of immigration, but in terms of betraying Brexit, in terms of increasing taxes to record 70 years high, wasteful government spending to 70 years high and the state of the national debt. They broke the country, and Labour is in the process of bankrupting the country. Now, you talk about data, and this morning they're all excited in the Labour Party because GDP in the first quarter has grown, apparently, 0.7%. Well, that may be what the data shows. But as I said to folk, that's not how people feel in their pockets. I don't think anybody feels that we're getting richer. I think everybody feels that actually, per person, per household, we're all getting poorer. And we have been for some time. That's the reality. And, it's a good idea to focus on the cash. Focus on the cash flow, very important for businesses. Many of you will have run businesses. So the spring statement at the end of March, I sort of sat there and they rabbited out the numbers, and I just looked at the numbers, and I knew about the state of the debt, and I rushed out after the spring statement, and I said, these OBR numbers are delusional, absolutely delusional. I did 14 interviews on the bounce, and I kept using that word. I was the only person who had spotted that there was a massive flaw in the borrowing numbers. They said that the national borrowing for the year to end of March would be 137 billion. Well, to the end of Feb, it was 132 billion by their own numbers. And I knew that March was going to be a bad month, as did they. And sure enough, it ended up literally 4 weeks later. I mean, this is the OBR. They've got loads of expensively paid economists. 4 weeks later, it wasn't 137, it was 152. If they can get it 10% wrong in just 4 weeks, 15 billion quid out, we've got a problem, folks. And this is the thing. And so sure enough, the gilt yields, the 10-year gilt yield is creeping back up again. And that's what I'm very focused on, because in the same way that we can't imagine what it'll be like if the boats keep coming for the next 4 years. Some of you may well work in the finance markets. I don't think the bond markets will tolerate the government spending 150, possibly 200 billion more every year than we're earning. At some point, they're going to say, we're done. Enough's enough. If you want to borrow money, the price goes up. And so, we've got a serious, in this parliamentary term, we've got two critically serious things potentially around the corner. We could well face we've got the boats crisis, which is there and present and real, and we could well have some form of financial crisis. And you never know when it turns. But when the markets turn, they act in a herd-like instinct, and they run for the hills. And there's almost nobody else in the House of Commons who has a Scooby clue. And so, sure enough, we've had a bit of we get a bit of flack. I mean, we quite enjoy flack. And I'll come on to that. But we get more abuse now on certain things, like net stupid zero, than we got on Brexit, and it's because of the money. But yeah, we took a bit of flack on our economics policy, and of course, because we're doing so well, there's extra scrutiny, and that's fine. But actually, on the election contract that we produced last year, and that they're now re-looking at and say, well, these numbers. Well, on the three big issues that I talked about, I've been proven bang on right, pretty much, on all three of them. So I was the first guy that said the Bank of England should not be paying voluntary interest to enrich city institutions on all the printed money that was still outstanding. And I said, by the way, and don't do a thing called quantitative tightening. And all the journos are scratching their head, they've not got a clue what I'm talking about. And I said, it's about 30 to 35 billion. And then, so they all went away, and the economists, and they looked at it. Blow me down, they said. Even Peston, bless his cotton socks. He was a bit grumpy with me last night, you may have seen. He said, bother, Tice is right. And then the FT said Tice is right. And then the Economist had to say it. And then the Sunday Times had to say it. So it's bang on the money. None of the other politicians understood what the hell we were talking about. None of the Tories. And so they don't want to talk about it because they don't understand it. And then I had the temerity to say that net stupid zero was probably costing the taxpayer 30 billion quid a year. And sure enough, I said that last May, and the government sort of department scratched their head in that typical Sir Humphrey way. We don't recognise that number. What that basically means is you're close, you're not bang on. And sure enough, the Climate Change Committee earlier this year, they had the good grace to come out with some numbers, and these are people on the other side of the debate, And they said, guess what? You need to spend maybe 50 billion a year, it might be 25, 30 net, brackets, Tice is right, close brackets. And then I said we could save £5 and 100 across all government spending. And they said, no, there's no waste in the government, there's no waste anywhere, it's all absolutely perfect. I said, really? And sure enough, in December, the Chief Secretary to the Treasury writes to all the government's departments, please save £5 and 100, open brackets, Tice is right, damn, close brackets. But I was being too cautious because it turns out when you've got all the whistleblowers coming to us, and I'm pretty certain as we open the lid on the council accounts, I think I was undercooking it. I really do. I mean, they want to blow 20 billion quid on carbon capture that even the Greens thinks is mad. 10 billion quid they want to send on overseas climate aid. And don't talk to me about the worst property deal in the history of mankind on the Chagos Islands, which, by the way, has gone very quiet. But where they thought it was a good idea to take a valuable freehold asset, and there's lots of glorious valuable freehold assets around here in Dorking and Surrey. And normally, if you sell a freehold asset, the idea is when you give it to someone else, they pay you. I mean, is that unreasonable? I don't think so. No, but apparently under this deal, under this Labour government, we'll give away a very valuable asset, and we'll pay them for the next 100 years. On a RPI inflator. You couldn't make it up. Oh, and then we had the bright idea, we'll immediately sublet it to our good friends, the Americans. Well, you might say, sorry about that, it's nothing like as important as talking to you. You might say, well, if we're going to sublet it to the Americans, maybe we'd ask the Americans to chip in a bit. No, we haven't asked them for a dime. Not a dime. So, of course, the Americans, happy days. They've got it for the next 99 years. They haven't got to pay a dime. If the stupid limeys are that dumb that they're going to give it to us for 100 years for free, what do we care? That's the reason why the Americans are being fairly relaxed about it. But the Labour government has gone very quiet on this, and we think it's because, A, the debt numbers, but B, they're in such trouble on things like the winter fuel allowance, that they realise that this is actually just untenable, and we've sort of corrected the numbers. And we don't know if it's 9 billion, 18 billion, but actually the truth is it could be, depending on inflation, it could be as high as 50 billion over 99 years. Now, we may or may not still be around, depending on medicine, but this is absolute madness. Absolute madness. And that's how they're prepared to sort of just give away our cash. So, immigration's a key battleground. On the economics, I'm very comfortable with the numbers. You'll be plus and minus a bit. But some of you will have seen the article I had in the Telegraph this morning, responding to Jeremy Warner's attack on me last week. And look, that's scrutiny's fine. But I am the only person in the House of Commons that's run a multi-billion-pound business, multinational, listed on the stock exchange, where I tripled the share price in 4 years. So actually, unlike the rest of them, we know what we're talking about. And so I'm pretty confident about this stuff. What I don't know is what's going to be the state of the economy in 4 years' time. What's going to be left? And that's the real challenge, is what's going to be the state of it. Now, in fairness, look, if I am wrong, if the green economy is the great nirvana, and the economy continues to grow, and they stop the boats, then things may evolve a bit. But I think it's pretty unlikely. I mean, does anybody think we're going to get back to the sort of levels of growth we had in the 80s and 90s? I mean, I'm old enough to remember when every year it would grow by 2.5% to 3.5%, and people would get a bit anxious if it dropped below 2%. If it dropped below 1%, it was like a moral recession. Now, it's the champagne act. If you get to 0.5%, it's like a round of drinks. So those are the three key things. But then it brings me on to my sort of little pet favourite at the moment, which is driving the left nuts. Net stupid zero. It's very important. Put that word in the middle because it is catching on. We've got people opening the doors to us saying, and they literally repeat the slogan. And I think it's quite possible the next general election will be fought around immigration and net stupid zero, because they're promising that the bills will come down. But Net Zero Watch, they reckon their calculations are that actually every household on average, your bills are probably going to be £900 higher in 4 years' time than now. And if that's the case, anywhere near that, they're doomed, absolutely doomed. They're as finished as the Tories, and we will win a thumping majority. So that's sort of the direction of travel, and it's pretty extraordinary. And the lies that are being told and the cons that's going on about this renewable stuff, I mean, it's quite extraordinary. And in Lincolnshire, we've discovered a new gas field just north of Lincoln, 10 years worth of gas. We're the only developed nation in the world that's not using our oil and gas. So these are the reasons why I think actually we will continue to make great progress. But it requires serious hard work, and we've just got to keep the foot on the gas in about 8th or 9th gear of a fossil fueled car. I'm only joking. I mean, I do actually. I've got a Tesla because I'm not a petrol head. I mean, I'm not a great one for noise. I'm a bit shy, really. But do we think it's going to change the world? No. And things have got to be affordable for ordinary folk, and we're in serious danger under this government and under the Tories that net zero is making us all bankrupt. It is funny now, I have to say. We do sort of laugh. They're the Tories now. They're sort of spluttering towards us on net zero. Them the ones that legislated for it back in 2019. They seem to have conveniently forgotten that. Anyway, so I think that the Tories genuinely are heading towards oblivion. It is if we get it right, it is a 1 in 100 years shift and change. And it will just require hard work, it will require fundraising at every level, and huge branch activity. Because we can't do it at the top. And there's no one better, as Mayuran said, than Nigel on campaigning experience. That's why we've got to get that thrust of energy and enthusiasm from the branches. And these events are going on literally up and down the country every night. And with similar sort of attendances to this, if you go to a Tory branch meeting at the moment, you'll be lucky to fill the front row. There may not be a second row. So that's sort of how this shift is happening. There is a huge swell of enthusiasm. And I just sort of course we'll make mistakes. But goodness me, we've got some momentum, we've got some traction. Broadly, we know what we're doing. We're full of optimism. We're full of hope. And I think that if we make progress with these councils and continuing progress, we have no doubts that we must, we can, and we will win the next general election. Thank you very much.
Okay, the gentleman there in the mauve. That's it.
Hello. What is Reform's policy on non-DOMs?
Great question. What is our policy on non-DOMs? Well, we've got tens of thousands of people leaving the UK as we speak. I mean, the numbers it's hard to know the numbers. And we need to attract those people back. But we're only going to do that by having an attractive tax environment and an attractive economic environment where, frankly, risk-taking pays and work pays. But it's not just the non-DOMs. I mean, my beloved, she's legged it. She's a school fees VAT refugee. On principle, she said, sod this. And here's the real thing, though. It's the teachers, it's the doctors, it's the dentists going elsewhere. Seriously trained, skilled people. And it's a tragedy at every level. But that's what's happening. And do you know the saddest thing for me was when a 20-year-old undergraduate at Durham University a few months back, he said, Richard, should I stay or should I go? And it was pretty grim. So by the next election, we will have a policy, and I think lots of people will realise that it's a pretty sensible one.
Okay. Next question. Okay, these two ladies here.
I'm just doing it for Andrew. Thank you.
No speeches, please.
No, it's not a speech, but I'm going to be cheeky and ask for 2 questions, if I may. So IR35 has really hurt freelancers and small business owners. Would you scrap IR35 or at least reform it? And what would you do to make things fairer for the self-employed?
Great, thank you very much. Yes, so in the election contract last July, we said we'd scrap it in its entirety. I mean, it's madness. And bluntly, that's what we've got to do. And in a sense, as my article today in the Telegraph said, we've just got to simplify so many of the daft regulations. And we've probably got to, sometimes some things are so broken you can't refurbish it. It's like a knackered old building. You might be better just demolishing it and start again. And we may well be in that situation with much of this stuff. So yeah, we've got to scrap it, and it wouldn't be that expensive. And making life easier for the self-employed, for small traders, small businesses, lifting the VAT threshold, this is a critical part of what we've got to do.
Okay, thank you. Can I just ask one really cheeky question here? Okay, so a cheeky question. So I'm the county organiser for Berkshire, and I would love to book you to do a similar event.
God, that's put me on the spot. Yes. All right.
I'll put you in touch. Thank you. Okay, yes, this gentleman here.
Good evening. Thanks for coming to Dorking, first of all, Richard. Very much appreciate it. Recently this week, Prime Minister's question, Sir Keir Starmer was critical of Reform not having voted for their immigration bill. I wondered if you could clarify why that was, because I don't know enough about it, but surely some improved rules have got to be better than none at all.
Yeah, no, look, good question. And of course, he's delighted to say that. All that bill does is create Border Security Command and give him the ability to try and smash the gangs. And we know that's not working. It's encouraging the gangs. And it didn't have the critical thing that he's confirmed he won't do, which is it doesn't leave the ECHR. And that on its own is enough in every sense, because we know that the human rights lawyers are just driving a coach and horses through all of the various bits of legislation that the Tories have tried and this lot will try. So, yeah, that's why we voted against it. It's meaningless guff. I have to tell you, a lot of what goes on in the House of Commons is meaningless guff. It's terrifying, actually.
Okay. All right, this gentleman here.
Thanks for coming to Dorking, Richard. Appreciate it. I'm going to give you a situation, if that's okay, and possibly put you on the spot a bit. God willing, Reform come out on top of the next general election, but you need a coalition. As things stand, who's the obvious choice to partner with?
Great question. But obviously, we don't deal in hypotheticals. We're going to win. If you're mad enough to go into politics, you've got to be an optimist. And so we are fighting to win. And based on everything that's going on at the moment, that's what we plan to do. So we will, if we keep pushing and if we deliver, then we will win, and we'll win an outright majority. And frankly, the truth is the country will need it. Yeah, I've learned to be a politician where occasionally, if it's a difficult one, I'll duck it. And that's one of them. I nearly passed it to Mayuran, and that's the next one.
Okay, let's go further back. Chap on the right there. We'll keep going back with the questions, don't worry.
Hi, Richard. One of the biggest problems that I think we have is judicial activism and lawfare. What on earth are we going to do about it?
Yeah, judicial activism and lawfare. Well, sometimes you've got to play them at their own game. And as Zia announced last week, we actually now, in the councils that we control, we're going to use lawfare to challenge the HMOs that are being occupied by the asylum seekers and being used by the likes of Serco, and we're going to challenge the hotels on a bunch of different levers and regulations and stuff. So, sometimes if you can't beat them, join them. I know it sounds sort of, but that's the reality. Likewise on the solar farms and the BES systems, which I didn't touch on, which are damn dangerous, as I sort of ranted on in the House of Commons today. So, but yes, fundamentally, when we're running the government, the real people we've got to take on it's the civil servants and the related judicial activists. But what you've got to do is you've got to leave some structures. So you've got to leave the ECHR, you've got to scrap the Human Rights Act, some of the stuff is it's so wrong. You can't tweak the HRA. Actually, just got to start again. Have we written it now? No. But that's the way we're going to have to take some of this stuff on. It's like the Equality Act 2010, very well intentioned, but it's ended up with a whole industry of DEI officers. And, you know, I mean, you don't need in Leicestershire 15 DEI officers. And in Lincolnshire, of course, they were smart. They called them something else. So that when they get an FOI request, they said, we've got none. Nothing to see here, Gov. But actually, there's a whole bunch of them called something else. So, yeah, look, we've got to take it on. Will it be easy? No, it'll be difficult. But we've just got to be tougher than everybody else. And in a sense, if we're right about the direction of travel of the finances, it may be easier to be tougher if the situation is grimmer. So let's wait and see.
Okay, Simon, going back to, yeah, that's fine.
Good evening, Richard. Thank you for coming to see us. I keep getting my questions and except to invent a new one. My substitute question is, what is your attitude towards the monarchy's interference in the politics of this country?
The monarchy's interference?
The monarchy's interference in the politics of this country.
Yeah. Our noble king. A good question. I mean, I think we all know King Charles's sort of views on certain things around the environment and conservation, which is sort of primarily driven by his late father. It doesn't keep me awake at night compared to everything else that's going on, to be honest. You know, I mean, obviously the Prince of Wales is sort of following down some of that route. I think they're pretty smart. I think they know that you know, they've got to be really careful. To be honest, what I'm much more concerned about is actually the good health of the monarchy, because you know they are a key bedrock of who we are as a nation, and they're one of our greatest marketing assets, and we need them to live a long and healthy life and work hard for the nation.
Okay, Ryan's going to have a...
Yeah, on the issue of the monarchy, I'd just like to add, I think the monarchy can play a huge role in being the kind of pinnacle of our British identity. I mean, if you look at the coronation, and even the late Queen's funeral, that brought the country together in a way that I've never seen in my lifetime. It looks like empty ritual, pomp and symbolism, but that matters. It matters tremendously. And the throne, you know, you saw the coronation. It was, you know, the Archbishop of Canterbury invoking the Holy Spirit of God, essentially, and then divinizing the throne so that Charles could be the representation of the whole nation. And we were all witnessing that, we were all partaking in that, and there was a tremendous sense of patriotism. And so for me, the apolitical nature of the monarchy is quite important, but the symbolism of the throne, the Church of England, and that binding identity, I think is so critical to bring us all together and forge as one nation. So I think that's what I think the monarchy should do forward.
And Mara's 100% right. But actually, and it comes back to this point around unifying around, you know, our bedrock as a Christian nation, unifying around our flag, and that's why we took the decision of the councils to say actually that we just want the we want the Union Jack to fly, the county flag, and that's it. And in England, obviously, the George Cross. And these are key things that we have to rebuild confidence in. What's remarkably exciting is the enthusiasm from huge chunks of the young who are enraged at what is going on in schools, absolutely enraged. And although Labour said they were going to give the vote to the 16 to 18-year-olds, which we're not in favour of, I think they might actually just quietly park that to one side. I wonder why.
Okay, let's keep going back. Yes, right at the back row there.
Hi, Richard. Thank you for coming to Dorking. I'm a teacher. I lived abroad for 15 years as a teacher and recently came back to the UK. Modern education in Britain is a mess. What can we do to get it back on track?
Yeah, great question. And this is one of those, thank you. And thank you for coming back. I mean, what a brave man. Is everything all right, sir? Look, this is one of those things, it's not going to be easy. You know better than me, because the academic establishment is, it's so bad that the boss of the National Education Union, one Daniel Kabade, him and Nigel have gone to war. It really is that bad. And they called us all sorts of unpleasant things at their recent conference. And so, yeah, some of these people, and there is a sort of cult-like attitude amongst, some of the sort of the academic leaders, both in, are you in a secondary school, sir?
Actually, private language education.
Excellent. But whatever one is in, the secondary schools, I was involved in governing academies, but the universities are even worse. They are seriously bad, and at every level. And I was speaking at a conference on Sunday, and 3 students from King's College London, and what they were saying, and they were from the Jewish community, what they were saying about how they can't even have a debate. The anti-Semitism in our universities is way worse than any of us could possibly dare to imagine. It's truly, truly shocking, particularly in London, but actually almost everywhere. So, it's a major, major problem, and it's going to take hard work, and probably there'll be a huge amount of lawfare in it. But in a way, it may be the best way to deal with it is just by the pupils' momentum and sense of wanting to learn the difference between right and wrong, and it's sort of funny. So I speak once a year at an A-level student conference in central London, and there's 2,000 A-level politics students there. And I know I'm going to wind them up, so I say, there's only 2 genders and there's only 2 sexes. And half the place lights up in applause. And the other half, they don't. They get quite grumpy with me. And it's sort of like, where's the most noise coming from? It's unbelievable. But I think we're starting to win that battle. And that's because we do actually not need the Supreme Court to tell us what a woman is. Keir Starmer does, but we don't.
Rich, what's the status of the free speech bill at university now? It was a Conservative bill, didn't quite make it through.
Yeah, look, the honest answer at the moment, with Bridget Phillipson as our Education Secretary, everything's heading south. She is a true Marxist, and all of that stuff is in real trouble. So we're probably going to have to start again on both free speech and then related issues around online harms, safety of children, mobile phones. All this stuff is really important and really difficult. But there's some quite good stuff actually on, the damage to children with mobile phones, social media is incalculable. It's an experiment that we are in the early years of, really. But technology is moving quite quickly that I think will give us hope. So I've seen a device where it's a mobile phone device for the under 16s, and it can prevent any inappropriate activity, pictures, graphics, words. As it comes through the phone before it hits the screen to be viewed, the last thing that happens is the software detects it and shuts it out. So that's pretty serious tech, and that's the sort of tech that I think hopefully will help hugely. Yeah.
Okay, yes, waving at the back. Yep, Simon, thanks.
Thank you. It's Richard Bainey. I'm chair of the Runnymede and Weybridge branch of Reform. Just a question. We've grown rapidly over the last year, tremendous membership figures, which is heartening. And of course, that's meant probably there's a strain at the centre because of a relatively small staff. And I just wondered if, and in terms of communication with branches and support for branches from the centre, are there plans afoot? I know everybody's been working manfully and womanfully, let's leave trans out of it, to support branches, but are there plans afoot to enhance the support for branches?
Thank you. Yes. So we have grown rapidly. I mean, like unbelievably rapidly. But the number is real. 230,000. Don't listen to Kemi. That was probably her worst moment, actually. She had a bad Christmas. But no, the number is real. And yes, that means that there's some stresses and strains. But obviously, in a sense, there's two aspects to that. One is, I mean, I think we're making progress on the IT. It's never perfect, of course, but I think we're making progress on that. And then on fundraising, I think, you know, there's always demands. Can we do this? Can we do that? We've always got election campaigns. That's why, you know, I think the financial support, we've got to raise the money locally for branches, as you were saying earlier, Jeff. But other support coming, I think, on the tech side, communications. Look, one of the hardest things is communication. And do we get it right all the time? No. We are fallible. We'll get some stuff right. We'll get some stuff wrong. And we've just got to keep learning lessons and keep doing better. But it is, when you get this rate of growth, yeah, stuff happens for sure. And I accept that. And where it annoys the hell out of you, I'm sorry. We'll try and keep doing better.
Are there moves afoot to do something about the website? It seems to be rather stuck in...
Yes, there are, but what I can't answer. But there are. There's
okay.
Yeah, it's sort of, it's all evolving. Yeah, we had to get through. It's sort of, we had to get through the elections, and then we can sort of see where we're at. So yeah, there's all of that stuff.
Okay. White shirt.
Without wishing to rain on the parade, because we are achieving great things, but I am going to raise the elephant in the room. Rupert Lowe. What was done to him was outrageous and not worthy of the people who support this movement. So what is going to be done about Rupert Lowe? Now, I'm not going to put you on the spot and suggest, you know, is there going to be an internal investigation and disciplinary action? But I would like your personal assurance that nothing like this will ever happen again in a party that I support.
And thank you for raising it. Yeah, look, what I would say to that is, of course it was sad. Of course it wasn't Plan A. But you don't win elections, or you don't win football matches with a team of 11 individuals. You win a football match with a team of 11 players who are part of the team, under one manager, one boss. And that's the same in a political party. You know, you have your discussions and your debates behind closed doors, and then you unify and you push on, and that's how you win elections. And I would say to in a sense, the electorate have spoken, and we've just won a landslide, and whatever Rupert does, Rupert will do.
Okay, that's not quite it though, is it? Because setting the police on him and smearing him to say that he has dementia, that is dirty politics, and we don't want that. I don't think he was disloyal to Nigel. I don't think he was attacking Nigel. I'm very disappointed by what has happened. You can't just characterise it as Rupert was trying to mount a coup against Nigel. It was disgusting that the police were weaponised against Rupert.
To which I would answer, I know what really went on, and let me tell you, sir, you're completely wrong. It's as simple as that.
I'm completely wrong.
I'm telling you, I know exactly what went on, and you're completely wrong.
I would like a discussion with you after the event. I would like to speak to you personally.
With the greatest respect, sir, Rupert, no one said Rupert got dementia. That was just bullshit, okay? But what went on, I know exactly what went on, and do we regret there was a row? Of course. But don't believe everything that you read in the press. Read between the lines, and just remember, we have been around the block. We do know what we're doing, and I would just say, trust us.
Okay.
But thank you for raising it, because that's the joy of free speech.
Okay, Simon, just behind you. No, Oh, okay, we'll come to this lady first, that's fine.
This might be an easier question. How do you plan to tackle rising crime and restore real public confidence in policing, particularly when many feel officers are more focused on political correctness than protecting the public? And where is the commitment to getting bobbies back on the beat?
Yeah, great question. And I'm sorry I didn't touch on it, but look, I mean, it is absolutely in a shocking state and getting worse. And I suspect many of us have either seen shoplifting or been the victims of crime recently. I walk down the pavement in London as close to the building as I can. And I've now got sort of a device that basically, if someone tries to grab a phone out of my hand, it's strapped to my hand. It's that bad. So, yeah, it all comes down to leadership. And the leadership of the police forces has broadly collapsed. And the leadership of the justice system has broadly collapsed. And you look at why, well, if you look at the College of Policing, that's a disaster. You look at the dreadful independent office for police conduct. I mean, these things are broken institutions that just need demolishing and starting again. And so that's led to, police officers on the front line are as good as the instructions and the management and the guidance they're given. And if they're let down and given duff advice and told to go and arrest Alison Pearson on a Sunday morning, then it's not their fault. So it's a root and branch start again, but it is twofold. So it's the management of the police forces. Bluntly, we should go back to the situation we had 50 or 60 years ago, where most of the chief constables were former military personnel. But then alongside that, you've got to have a justice system where actually you are getting people to court in a timely fashion. And you've got to get rid of the sort of the wokeism in the police, the ridiculous things we hear about every week now. I mean, the gentleman just in the papers the other day, who was a former police officer of Kent, I think it was, who was arrested by his own former colleagues. I mean, you couldn't make some of this stuff up. So it is truly appalling. It won't happen overnight. But that's why in our election we said you've got to invest money both in the police but also in the justice system, which is truly broken. You want to come back on it?
My second part of that question would be, how would you manage to get policing back into local areas? Because obviously many, many years ago, all the local police stations were stripped away, the housing was taken away. If you call the police, they're all running around in cars, there's no one on foot anymore. So how would you tackle trying to bring back the police into the actual community so there's actually a presence which in turn may deter crime? Because at the moment the police don't have any powers.
Yeah, it's a great question. The answer is it's the leadership. The leadership have got to get them out of the police stations and get them out on the street. Part of that is the technology. When I went to see the chief of the New York Police Department back in 2018, and I looked at their technology back then, I was thinking about London, and I mean their tech was amazing. The tech for the police is a catastrophe. So if you get the tech right and they've got the right, literally in the palm of their hand, then they can spend more time out on the street. I think that's a critical part of it, but fundamentally it's about the leadership. And in many cases, in some areas, yes, they're very short on staff, like Lincolnshire's a disaster. But in London, they're not actually short on personnel. London's got about as many police officers as New York has. But if you look at the difference in terms of the presence on the street, there's something seriously wrong with the management. So yeah, we need a much more visual presence. But it's so bad now that in some areas, both in London and some towns, actually councils are essentially employing a private militia. And I know that sounds dramatic, but for example, there's a thing called My Local Bobby, which is a bunch of former police officers and things. They go into various places, Milton Keynes, Ipswich, places in suburbs in London, and make a rapid difference. And we've got to be prepared to quickly privately prosecute lots of people, and that's what they do, for example. So there's a whole bunch of different ways, and we've got to be radical about this stuff because Again, what will this look like in 4 years' time if you look at the decline over the last 4 years? I don't know.
Okay, Mayuran wanted to just...
Yeah, I just wanted to echo some of what Richard was saying, is that I think a lot of these problems stem from Tony Blair's era, where he started... Well, almost everything stems from Tony Blair, you could say. But he started this kind of sort of fetishizing education to the point where everything was about university degrees. And that's also infiltrated the police system. The leaders believe that they're more academics than policemen or policewomen. And that philosophizing of policing rather than actual policing has infiltrated the whole culture. And so I speak to patients of mine who are sort of police officers, and they tell me that the line between civil crimes or civil offences and actual crimes is being blurred with the non-crime hate incidences. And the police response is also being blurred. So you get 6 police officers coming to Alison Pearson and no one coming for a burglary. And in Surrey Police, you have 1 police officer with something like 1.7 backroom staff who work from home, right? And dictating how people on the ground work. And so it's a mess.
It is a mess, but a lot of it comes down to leadership, because a lot of that is just a lack of common sense. And I think that at every level of, it's easy to say it needs more money, more resources. I'm not convinced it is, actually. I just think it's a lot more common sense and getting proper value about the money that you're currently spending. That I think is what it's really about. The tragedy is when experienced police officers, because they're not getting the support, they're giving up and they're saying, I'm done. And that's because when you lose the wisdom and experience of officers who've been serving for 20 to 25 years and they leg it, then that becomes much, much harder for the new folk coming through, and they should be coming through age 18, not having got sometimes a useless degree.
When is Alison Pearson joining the party?
Oh, goodness me. She's an independent journalist. Perish the thought. Alison's great. I've not actually seen, but there was obviously a very important hearing today with Lucy Connolly. I don't know if they didn't reach a conclusion, so it's rolled forward. Yeah.
Okay, by the way, we've just got about 10 minutes left, so now we've got a forest of hands. But I did see one here, and we'll take
Richard,
another. Yeah.
Richard, lovely to see you. If you were Richard from accounts, how would you provide growth in the economy?
Good Lord, Richard from accounts. How would we grow the economy? Well, read my article in today's Telegraph is the summary of it. But fundamentally, you've got to make work pay. And for entrepreneurs and business owners and the self-employed, you've got to make risk-taking pay. Those are the 2 key things. And that's all about incentive and motivation and a sensible regulatory environment within which to operate. And if you make things too difficult, or if you make it, for youngsters, if it's not worth working more than 16 hours a week because of the way the benefit system is structured, then you're in deep trouble, and that's where we are. So we've just got to make work pay, and we've got to make risk-taking pay. And everything else, bluntly, will then thrive thereafter. That's sort of what happened in the 80s. So yeah, and we've got to keep it simple. We can't overcomplicate it. What I don't know genuinely, though, is what is going to be the state of the country's finances in 3 to 4 years' time.
Okay, actually, I meant, yeah.
Hello, Richard. Richard Barker, Chairman for Woking Branch. First of all, thank you very much for coming this evening, and it's fantastic having you in Parliament. Congratulations, sir, on your victory there. The Lord Chancellor role used to be a real role. It was accountable to the people because it sat in government. It was a cabinet role. But it also had oversight of the judiciary. I believe it sat in the House of Lords, and it ensured that the judiciary was managed properly. But because it because it sat in 2 places, it also provided accountability to the people, because it also was a cabinet role in government. When the Lord Chancellor role in all its glory was basically defenestrated, and we now have a Lord Chancellor in name only, and it was replaced by the Supreme Court, and whole new structure as part of I think it was the 2005 legislation, if I recall. It is now so remote from any accountability. It's not really, there's no accountability to the people because the Supreme Court is remote from both Parliament and Cabinet.
If your question is,
so,
what's the role of it?
Well, no, that is not my question, sir.
I'm just conscious a number of other people want to...
No, but it's a very critical role. So, but because we now have a judiciary that's not accountable to the people in any way, and it appears to have accountability elsewhere. And the question is, to whom is it accountable? That's not my question to you, but it is a question that's out there. We need to...
Richard, we need to get to the question because there's some other questions that want to be asked.
So the question is, would we bring back the Lord Chancellor role in its earlier form, or would we look at creating a similar role that looked similar to the way it was before, just to ensure the judiciary is still accountable to the people and not rogue?
Look, the bottom line is that Parliament sets legislation, and the role of the Supreme Court is to interpret the legislation. I mean, that's the bottom line. And then you need but it comes back really, I think what most people are interested in is a justice system that works at the grassroots level for ordinary people that they've got confidence in. And yeah, I mean, there's some mad stuff that's gone on, but fundamentally, I think people want a justice system that works promptly, where common sense prevails, where you can trust the judgments. And there is a genuine question that we're starting to have a debate about whether or not should you go down the American route of having some form of accountability of judges. And there's a bunch of ways of doing that, because you look at some of the immigration decisions made in the immigration tribunals, and they're nuts. And at the moment, your accountability point, there is a lack of it. Have I got the answer here tonight? No. But people are losing confidence in just the whole system of justice. And it's way bigger than just one role, I would suggest. It's the way the whole thing is managed. Speed. I mean, I'm impatient. We're all impatient. We've got to have speed to it.
Okay.
Hello.
And then Jen.
Good evening. Just a quick question. Do you think that Keir Starmer will offer the people who have come over by boat amnesty before reform get into power?
Good question. Well, if he does, he'd be very, very, very foolish, even more foolish than perhaps he sometimes is, because that would guarantee him the wipeout of the Labour Party. But let's hope he doesn't, because that would be that would be very bad news.
Could reform preempt that in some way and say, if that happens, we will reverse it?
Yes, it's a good point. Well, we've essentially started to say that, for example, on the Chagos Islands. We've said we'll rip up the Chagos Islands deal if there is one, and there may not now be one. So, yeah, we'd rip that up. On this, yeah, we might have to say we would revoke that citizenship.
I mean, fundamentally, the Labour government is illegitimate, in my view, just based on the number of votes it received and a ridiculous number of MPs, of course.
Yeah, look, but that's the bottom line is I know what you feel, but fundamentally, that's the system we've got. We've got to deal with the cards we're dealt, and we've got to win under that system, and I think we can.
Okay, we've got enough time for a couple more.
Two more?
Two more, yeah, Alex. Sorry? All right. All right, we'll do that one, and then one down here.
Thank you. Hello, this is just a general question, really, and that is that all these policies that come out that are utterly ridiculous, we hear Boris, who was a big letdown, tell us, oh yes, we will revoke this, revoke that, makes sense before they go in, and then they don't do it. So my question is this, all your fantastic ideas, how easy is it in real terms to actually reverse legislation when we feel that really the civil servants are running the country, and with all the great intentions that everybody has, in real terms, they're actually not able to reverse the civil servants that sort of block the changes in legislation. And how do we deal with the House of Lords that sort of then blankly puts things... In other words, how easy is it to reverse legislation in real terms?
Can we deliver what we say?
Yeah,
Well,
that's it.
The simple answer is we know that the civil service is a problem. And yeah, I mean, fundamentally, if we win a decent majority, we will make it crystal clear to them. We've won on this manifesto, and you're either going to help us deliver it or you're fired. It is as simple as that. And will that... And of course, a bunch of them will take us to court and say that's, you know, they've been... Yeah, look, the bottom line is the Tories were more interested in position and power than actually delivering. And that, you know, that's the fundamental. Yeah, we've got to make it very clear to these people, you do what you're told or you're out. And there is a question mark about actually, I quite like the American system where a Secretary of State can bring in 15, 20 good people from the private sector into that department to help run it. The civil servants would hate it and we might have to go to war with them, fine. The state of the country by then is probably going to be in a situation where the people will demand it.
Okay, just got time for one more.
Hi, Richard. Thanks for coming. My question really is the same as Richard Barker's earlier. Obviously reform would take us out of the ECHR. Would you abolish the Supreme Court?
Yeah, good question. I'm not sort of going to make a commitment. As long as the Supreme Court interprets the legislation of Parliament, that's its job. Its job is not to be another Parliament. So, you know, I think that's what we need the Supreme Court to do. But there isn't. In a sense, the Supreme Court it's a double tier of appeal. So, in structural terms, it shouldn't. There's nothing wrong with it as long as they do the job they're set to do. If they decide to interpret themselves as different things and entities, then it goes badly wrong. So you sort of got to view it like that. Parliament is the ultimate sovereign legal legislative authority.
Okay, we'll have a...
Very, very quickly, it's also the fact that we need to elect these judges and put these judges, because at the moment there's a cartel and they just elect themselves and they're activist judges, and that's where it goes. And so along with that is,
Yeah, and it's the whole issue about electing judges it's quite a new one for us. And it's probably one of those things where actually you've got to have a bit of a national debate and talk about this stuff and just be prepared to consider stuff we've never considered before. What I can say though is this stuff it's sort of technical, but let me tell you, in 7 or 8 years of campaigning, no one's ever asked me about the Lord Chancellor or the Supreme Court on the door, so...
All right, okay. Well, look, we've run slightly over. I'm hoping Richard's going to stay around for a little bit longer. So let's call it a day now. We can adjourn to the bar. We've got that until late. And please give a warm round of applause for Richard.
Thank you, well organised.
Okay.
Brilliant.
Are you able to...
Yes. Marvellous. Thank you very much. Marvellous.